I was talking to a friend of mine about a week ago now, who lives in Prestwick, and I say this because I had specifically told him about this campaign, and I'd specifically told him about the law that had been introduced, and so on. And it obviously just went over the top of his head, and he'd only half listened to me. And this is like quite a close friend of mine. He says disdainfully. And I was speaking to him on the telephone about a week ago, and he says, I was talking to friends of mine about this named person thing, and we all agree, it'll never happen. It'll never happen. And I said, it's law. It has happened. He says, what? It's law, it has happened. He says, yes, it actually has happened. And it did occur to me that if my idiot friend doesn't realise that this has happened, and I'm not calling the rest of the parents in Scotland idiots, but I had told my friend about this, I'm involved in this campaign, I suspect 90% of parents in Scotland don't actually know that this has happened. But anyway, hopefully you all know, I presume you wouldn't be here otherwise, that the Named Person Initiative means that every child from 0 to 18 in Scotland will, by I think it's 2016, have a named person, a specific named person that the state is given to them. And I must admit, when I first heard about this initiative, the first thing that came into my head, well, is that that's peculiar, because when I was a child, my mother gave me a named person to watch over me, and they were called my godparents. And it seems very strange to me that now the state seems to have taken quite a crucial aspect of your sense of responsibility for your child, and even in terms of perhaps your community, your friends, your network, in terms of who's going to look after your interests. And that does seriously worry me in terms of the state's relationship with all of us, and with how they perceive people in terms of children and issues of child safety. So as I said, my name's Stuart Waiton. I set up a group called Generation Youth Issues quite a long time ago to look at issues of the over-regulation of young people and children's lives. So we looked at things about things like cotton wool kids, our kids playing out like they used to, and so on. So they were some of the things I got interested in. More recently, I've become particularly interested in early intervention. And I don't know if people know much about early intervention as a policy initiative, but I think early intervention actually lies behind a lot of the named person type initiatives. Essentially, the early intervention framework suggests that if you don't prevent just about every difficult situation for a child up to the age of 3, then that child is finished. Right? If emotionally, behaviourally, all sorts of parenting issues, problems, all to neglect and abuse. It's quite a broad church of things that may happen to a child. And this is part of the early intervention framework, which I see as being part of the reason why things like the Named Person Initiative have been introduced. I also think, and again these are just my opinions, they're not necessarily shared by other people, these are just concerns I'm throwing out because of my own preoccupations, if you like. I also think the issue of safety, and child safety in particular, is central to why these sort of initiatives have developed, and what I would describe as an obsession with child safety. Because I think nobody doesn't want a child to be safe, but when child safety becomes everything, and you look at all relationships through the prism of child safety, I think we start to have real problems in terms of how a society operates, not least in terms of how distrustful we become. If we're constantly looking for what damage is being done in every relationship, I think there's a serious problem. And just since the meeting, it's very interesting, probably one of the best documentary programs I've seen for a long time on ITV a couple of weeks ago, which I can't remember the name of it, but it was essentially about how many young children are being taken off their parents in Britain today. And apparently we're number 2 in the world for this. America's top. They seem to do well at certain things. And we're second in terms of very young children being taken off their parents, and you had a number of stories, harrowing stories of parents explaining why this was happening. And some of them are now, when they get pregnant, they know they're going to have their child taken off them, and they run off to France, go and see a French social worker. The French social worker says, in a French accent, "What is wrong with you British social workers? You know, you can't possibly," and they live in France and they can't come back to Britain because of the kind of hyper risk-conscious nature of social work today. And this was interesting. It was the head of the Social Work Association used the term culture of fear. We live in a culture of fear in terms of how social workers operate in relation to children. And I think that is worrying. And that, for me, if the named person initiative had been introduced 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, I wouldn't be as worried about it. I'd still think it was wrong, but I wouldn't be as worried about it. But in a context where I think child safety has become obsessive and out of control, I think it's something to be very worried about, and I am very worried about it myself. I was going to mention Americans, criminalisation of American parenthood, a nice article recently, just looking at how many American parents who leave their kids in the car for 2 seconds while they go to the toilet or the shop and all the rest of it are ended up being arrested. So it's nice to know it's just not just in Britain that child safety has become something beyond rational behaviour. Anyway, I'm just going to throw that out there. I think that's a context that I think helps to at least get us to think about an aspect of why the named person initiative is problematic.